behind pre-COVID New Zealand. Today's figures of 53% of students regularly attending are far behind the 80% target that our government has set to reach by 2030, and they're behind where we were even in 2019 pre-COVID at 58%. So yes, we are pleased that in 2024 our Term 2 figures are better than they were the previous year. They're significantly better in Northland or Te Tautokoro and here in Auckland, and they've improved in every single region. They've improved for primary, they've improved for secondary school. All of that is wonderful improvement, but nowhere near good enough for the future of our country. And that's why the government is announcing a number of changes to the way that we do attendance in a scheme that we call STAR, or Steps Attendance Response. STAR says that at every stage of a student's attendance journey, there are obligations for the schools, for the parents, for the student, and for the government through the Ministry of Education. If a student is attending 90% of the time, then we call that good. That's the goal. That means that you're missing no more than 5 days in any 10-week school term. However, if you miss more than 5 days, we call that step 2, which is worrying. And in that instance, the obligation goes on to the school and the parents to find out why the student is not attending as much as they should be and get them back to school. If a student misses more than 10 days, that is concerning. And then the obligation goes on to services such as attendance, oranga tamariki, and the local police to get that student back to school. And finally, if we get to a case where a student misses more than 15 days per term, or they're less than 70%, that's what we call chronic absence. That's around 8% of all students nationwide, and that is where we need to start looking at options such as fining parents or intensive wraparound support. We will also be changing the Education Act so that having an attendance plan is an obligation for every single school board in this country. We've been holding a number of hui or gatherings of people that are doing this successfully to find what the best ways to get children back to school are. I've just been at the Auckland City Attendance Service, ACES in central Auckland, where they've told me that there are some schools that are doing a fabulous job, but many schools that simply do not have the policies in place to get students back to school when they're not attending. And as a result of that, we need to ensure that we have a standardised scheme of what the obligations are of schools right across the country. If we get these things right, in addition to information sharing by each school with the oranga tamariki, with police, with MSD, then I think that we can all work together to get New Zealand's children back to school. It's not going to be easy, but it is crucial to the future of our country. And with that, really happy to take any questions about the material that we've released today. Actually, fining is something that they're asking for. I've just been speaking to some attendance officers who said the biggest problem we have is the power of no. A child says they don't want to go to school, we can't make them. A parent says we don't want to engage, we can't make them. There are some who won't pay the fine. They have a lot of problems. We don't want to give them extra problems. There are others who can afford the fine and will just pay it. That's regrettable. But there are some people who could send their children to school. They're not a can't, they're a won't. And I believe sometimes it is right to fine. And we're asking the Ministry of Education to step up and assist schools in prosecutions in those cases where it will make a difference. Yeah, we do. It's happened around the world. In other parts of the world where they have much better attendance than we do, fining is actually quite normal. You look at most of Europe, fining is a normal thing to do. Yes, it has.
No teacher-only days during term time. That'll go down like a lead balloon with teachers, I'm sure. Why are you doing that?
We're not here primarily for teachers, we're here for students and the future of this country. And actually, I challenge your characterisation. overwhelmingly teachers want to be successful, they want to help children's learning, and that's why we're saying teacher-only days are at the discretion of the Minister of Education. They're not something that you can just take willy-nilly, because if the teachers aren't showing up, it's pretty hard to motivate the students to show up.
Teachers would say, though, that basically holidays aren't actually during the next term. How do you respond to that?
Well, most New Zealanders will get 4 weeks off a year. I would hope that teachers are getting that, just like other employees. But at the end of the day, it's hard to tell students it's important to show up if the school then decides to close itself on days it should be open. And that's why we're enforcing the rules. If you want to have a teacher-only day, then you need to get the permission of the Minister of Education. It's actually always been the rule. We're just enforcing it.
So these the 5 days, 10 days, 15 days absent, these are ideas you put forward, but it doesn't appear that they're compulsory. So in theory, could a school say, oh, well, we'll escalate it if a child's away for 30 days?
No, we're saying that there's going to have to be an attendance plan at every single school, and we're...
That attendance plan is that I'm going to say that if a child is away for 30 days, then I'm escalating.
We're going to put out the model attendance plan. A school, I guess, in theory, could set the bar that low, but I think they're going to come under a lot of pressure from their community. Why do you think it's acceptable to be away 60% of the time? I don't think that's acceptable.
Will the ministry accept that? Will you accept that?
Well, I certainly wouldn't accept a school whose goal was to have students at school 40% of the time. The government's goal is 80%. We recognise that we need to start where we are, but what we're putting in place is a stepped attendance response plan that says wherever a child is at, there must be a response, and everybody has an obligation, whether it's the school, the parents, the students, or the ministry in the form of the government.
Does the ministry actually have the capacity to enforce this?
The ministry will make sure that it has the capacity to enforce it, and that's part of what we're going to be doing in budget bids. At the moment, we spend around $47 million a year in attendance services. We're going to be potentially increasing that. We also give operational grants to state schools that they can use, and many do actually choose to employ people for the purposes of attendance.
Will you be taking parents to court?
I won't personally, but what will be happening is that the ministry is going to start putting some muscle behind prosecutions. The ministry has the ability to prosecute, they just haven't really used it for the last 5 years.
How long is that going to take with how clogged our court systems are?
Well, certainly there is a challenge around the court system. However, I would put it to you that if getting kids back to school is achieved by taking a few court cases, it could be some of the most useful cases we take to court.
You're talking about 8% of students. That's a significant portion.
Well, I don't think anyone's assuming that every single student who's not attending will be prosecuted. I think what's important to be clear, there's some students where it's a can't, and a prosecution isn't actually going to make a lot of difference. But there are certainly cases that I've had shared with me where the parents could act, but are basically just giving the middle finger to the attendance service and to the school, and they actually need some consequences. Because one of the things I get talking to people that work in this area is there's lots of talking about rights, but there's no talking about responsibility. And as I heard from an attendance officer just this morning at Auckland City Attendance Service, they said, look, it's real simple. I'd love to talk myself out of a job because every single child deserves an education, but too many people aren't taking that seriously enough. So the people that do this work are asking us for these powers.
So do you have an estimate for how many court cases will result from this policy?
No, I don't, but I don't really think you need to have that to put the policy in place.
In terms of finding parents for low attendance, do you have like a figure in mind around how much you think it costs them?
No, I don't set that figure. I just know that what we need to do is start saying there are consequences as well as rights, there are responsibilities as well as rights, and that means you may well end up being fined if you don't make every effort. And I think that's the wider point here, is that it's the students, the parents, the school and the government all have an obligation, and that obligation ramps up as a student's attendance declines.
And I know the 5 to 15 days, that's just a guideline at this stage, but would that be assessed like across a term or in session or across an entire year?
Yeah, so it's across a term, so it's actually percentage. So a term, is usually 10 weeks, 50 days of school, give or take. So 10% is 5 days, 15%, and so on. Or sorry, 20% is 10 days, and so it goes on. Once you get to 15 days a term, you're at 70%. If you're missing more than 3 weeks out of a 10-week term, then you're not really seriously attending. And I think it's worth just putting that in a bit of perspective. Most people are at school for 12 or 13 years. So if you're away 10% of the time, then by the time you finish school, you've almost missed a year and a half of your schooling. And that's a long way to be behind. And I think sometimes people don't quite recognise the impact of this for the rest of your life. If you're one of these people that we would deem worrying, someone that's missing more than 10 days a week, well, actually, by the time you get to year 12, you've actually missed 2.5 years of school. That's a huge amount to miss.
Can you just elaborate on what you mean by some parents giving a middle finger to the system? What is actually happening? What have you
I've talked to attendance officers who have repeatedly tried to contact parents. They're being ignored, they're being told school's not important, that they don't want to engage, and ultimately I think that parent has an obligation to engage and cooperate with the attendance service, with the school and with the ministry to get their child an education. If they won't cooperate to get their child an education, maybe it's time to actually give them another reason to cooperate.
How widespread is that? Is that one report from one person?
It'd be a number. I've been talking and meeting with people in this area pretty much continuously over the last 6 to 8 months. Not in Botany, I've been in GI, I've been in Palmerston North, I've been in Christchurch, I've been in Central Auckland, you name it. Yeah. I would say, yep, pretty much. I couldn't tell you precisely at every meeting I've been to whether I've got that sentiment, but I think it's fair to say that the problem of parents who just don't want to cooperate is quite widespread. I'll give you another example. There's other times where it's the other way around. I had one community officer who actually confiscates Xboxes and PlayStations at the request of the parents, because the parents don't feel that they have enough control over their children in their own home. So they ask the cop to literally come in and play bad cop. On the other hand, there's areas where perhaps the kid is actually wanting to engage, but the parent doesn't want to cooperate. There's a range of scenarios, and we need to empower the people in each community to have the ability to respond.
Those truancy officers going into family homes and taking Xboxes and PlayStations?
Well, it's certainly a report I've had. I won't tell you where, but that's a report I've had from one very hard-working and diligent youth aid police officer. And the first thing I said to them is, "Aren't you supposed to stop theft?" They said, "Well, actually, the parents asked me to do it, and technically, it's their property." Well, I don't know, first of all, if there's a correlation. You're making a big assumption there. But first of all, if you had somebody who routinely takes their child out of school for holidays, then it might very well be that gets escalated through the stepped attendance response system, and it ultimately results in fines, yes. That's right. Each person has obligations at each step. So first of all, you'd have to be missing more than 5 days in a term. Then you move to worrying, and then at more than 10 days concerning. And once that happens, then there are different responses available to the school, to the attendance service and the Ministry of Education. No, because people of course would love to see modelling and love to see projections, but the truth is this is about empowering communities. Communities will have obligations and rights and powers to uphold attendance in their community, and how they will use those powers, you could make up some numbers, but I don't think that's helpful. All right.
Why is there an option at the moment choosing to fund maths over Te Reo Māori?
Well, I think the question is which are the most effective schemes. This is not a choice of maths over Māori. This is a choice of effective schemes over what's been an ineffective scheme. And if you're someone who is in favour of the revitalisation of Te Reo Māori, then you should be the first person to criticise the scheme being canned because that scheme hasn't worked.
So you don't want to empower teachers to learn Te Reo to then pass on to students?
Well, I think we're having if you listen to what the government is saying about this topic, it's not a question of having intention. The intention is we love language revitalisation. It's just this scheme didn't work. And then you have to ask yourself, do you put another $30 million into a scheme that doesn't work and then claim you care, or do you actually be honest about that and put it into something that will make a difference, where we know that we have real problems with the ability of teachers to teach maths?
Why not use that $30 million to get the outcomes you're seeking, but perhaps in a different way where you feel like it's more effective?
Well, first of all, that's been tried and it didn't actually work.
There's no possible way you can teach Te Reo Māori to teachers. There's no way.
Well, I'm sure that it certainly is possible, but what's been tried hasn't worked. We put $30 million into it, didn't succeed. We now have a dire need to upskill teachers in terms of mathematics and maths education, so we're going to do that. If someone can come along with a proposal that's going to add value for New Zealand students by teaching teachers Te Reo Māori, then obviously we'd look at that. But right now we've got a scheme that doesn't work and a dire need, so we're cancelling the scheme that hasn't achieved its goal and putting it into something that is a more urgent requirement. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you coming along. I hope that was useful, and I hope you have a lovely day. See you later.